Roy here, and welcome again to another edition of The Right Has Left, where we talk all politics on this podcast and review some of the news from this past week. So having said that, let's go ahead and get started. First that I want to talk about is the passing of Rob Reiner, a very tragic situation. As you are well aware of now, his son has been charged with the murder of his two parents, Rob Reiner and his wife. They were unfortunately stabbed to death, and just such a sad thing. But since this show is about all politics and things that were said about Rob Reiner's death, sadly, Donald Trump wrote on this past Monday on Truth Social that Rob Reiner, a tortured and struggling but once very talented movie director and a comedy star, has passed away together with his wife Michelle, reportedly due to the anger he caused to others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome, sometimes referred to as TDS. Whatever the hell that is. He was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump with his obvious paranoia. Who has paranoia? Reaching new heights as the Trump administration surpassed all goals and expectation of greatness, and with the golden age of America upon us, perhaps like never before, Trump continued. May Rob and Michelle rest in peace. Lawmakers, pundits, and others on both sides of the aisle, of course, quickly condemned the rhetoric. Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky, a frequent critic of the president, wrote on social platform X that challenges anyone to defend it. He challenges anyone. Regardless of how you felt about Rob Reiner, this is very inappropriate and disrespectful discourse about a man who was just brutally murdered, Massive wrote. And yes, it's so true. Donald Trump does not care about anybody or anything except himself. That's the sad thing about it. And when he's not in the spotlight and everything is positive in the media, that's why he's trying to create a state-controlled media, he gets upset. And, so this is how it goes. He degrades anybody that talks negative about him and praises everyone and anything that talks positive about him. And that is sad in a country where, up and beyond politics, you can have the right to agree to disagree, and in a civil way, not through, murder and torture like some people like to do. And it's just a situation where this is just sad. Rob Reiner was a great actor, a great director. He had created and directed many great films, and of course we all remember him on All in the Family, where he had just such a wonderful character. And even that show was kind of about politics, but they did it in a humorous way. But this is just sad, and I hope Trump has not retracted his statements. In fact, he just went on and on and on. He has his entire cabinet defending him. He had his Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt defending him, and the only one that didn't come out, even Johnson, who is in the House of Representatives, leads that. He wrote that I would have handled that in a totally different way. But this is Donald Trump. He likes to create discourse. He likes to create division. And when it's not about him, he just goes on there and talks about how everybody should be on his side. And if you're not, that's just too damn bad. So, another breaking news. Let's talk about the economic pages here for just a moment. Inflation did drop in November, ending a months-long acceleration of price increases and offerings relief for households strained by cost hikes. Government data on Thursday showed the reading came in below economics expectations, though. However, consumer prices rose 2.7% in November compared to a year earlier, marking a notable reduction from 3% year over year, with inflation of September, the most recent month for which complete data is available. This is why this 2.7%, the numbers are skewed a little bit, because during the government shutdown, data was not available. So even though this gives fire for Donald Trump to go on his continuous rallies and talk about how great everything is. These numbers do not basically reflect the total numbers that are supposed to be on these reports. So, having said that, inflation does stand at its lowest level since July. The report offered the first look at price increases in nearly 2 months after the 43-day government shutdown, as I just stated, impaired data collection. Despite an overall reduction of inflation, some high-profile items like coffee and beef continue to soar in November. Coffee prices jumped nearly 19% in November compared to a year earlier, while beef prices also climbed almost 16% over that span. So to basically kind of go over this, you do remember that Donald Trump said he's going to give millions and billions of dollars to the beef industry so beef prices can drop. We haven't seen that yet. And we're going to talk about his press conference here in just a second. But just so you know, I mean, it is good news for what data they do have that, things are dropped a little bit. It's still kind of high. But it is coming down a little bit. However, like I said, the data that is available is only that which went since the government reopened. So it's not a complete snapshot of what we really need to see. But, however, when I am transparent, if it's good news, it's good news. And this is kind of good news. Other late breaking news that has occurred here this just past couple of days is the drug prices. Yes, so drug prices are also going to drop a little bit here, thanks again to a negotiation that Donald Trump seems to have made with the so-called drug manufacturers. So let's talk about that for just a little bit. And that is several of the largest and U.S. and European-based drug makers inked deals with President Donald Trump on Friday to voluntarily sell their medications for less as his administration pushes to link the nation's drug prices to cheaper ones abroad. That includes Merck, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen, Gilead, GSK, Sanofi, Roche's Genentech. I said Roche's. Some people do call it Roche's. What can I say? Genentech had privately held Brogmar, Ilgium, and Novartis. In exchange, the companies agreed to a 3-year grace period during which their products won't face Trump's planned pharmaceutical-specific tariffs. In other words, he's not going to put the tariffs on them, as long as the drug makers further invest in United States manufacturing. Now, among the most notable pledges on Friday is that of Bristol Myers Squibb, who will offer Equalis. It's a blockbuster blood thinner and top prescribed product for free to Medicaid. Now, the companies make up the majority of the 17 drug makers Trump sent letters to in July, calling on them to lower prices as part of his most favored nation policy. Trump did sign an executive order in May to revive that policy, calling for prices to be increased outside of the United States and to end global freeloading. As of today, 14 out of the 17 largest pharmaceutical companies did respond and now have agreed to drastically lower drug prices for the American people and the American patients. Trump said at an event on Friday, "This represents the greatest victory for patient affordability in the history of American healthcare, and by far every single American will benefit." Now, Johnson & Johnson, AbbVie, and Regeneron are the remaining companies among the largest that have signed on that deal so far. But Trump noted that Johnson & Johnson will be here next week to talk about it and how the drug pricing deals will work, for the full terms of the deals were not immediately disclosed. The 9 drug makers agreed to take measures to reduce United States drug prices, including selling their existing treatments to Medicaid patients at the lowest, most favored nation prices and guaranteeing the pricing for new medicines. Trump said the drug makers also agreed to list their most popular drugs on the upcoming. Now, here's a catch, folks. Listen to the next sentence very, very carefully. I'm going to repeat. The drug makers also agreed to list their most popular drugs on his upcoming direct-to-consumer website, TrumpRx, which is launching in January. Let's talk about that for a minute. It seems like every time Trump comes up with a deal, he and or his family's got their fingers in it. In other words, there's got to be something in it for me, which, as you probably are well aware of, that is against the law for a sitting president to do things like this. But Congress refuses to act. until we get, perhaps the Democrats in the House of Representatives take control. But here goes Trump again. There's got to be something in it for me so I can make more billions and billions of dollars. So he's going to launch Trump RX. That is his solution to the rising healthcare prices. So all of those discount prices can go on his website, and then he can boast, "I've done something for you, the American people. Buy your products directly right off my website and save money." Again, this is private enterprise sticking their fingers into things like this. And again, a sitting president is not supposed to be doing this kind of stuff. But here we go. So some companies also launched new or expanded existing direct-to-consumer offerings for certain drugs. For example, Gilead said in a release that it will launch a program that will enable patients to access its hepatitis C treatment and cure Epulsa at a discounted price. So, it's great that prices are coming down. Again, don't get me wrong. I am so glad, especially myself now being a senior, that prices are going to come down on drugs as they should have. For decades, people in Europe could always get their drug prescriptions cheaper than we could here in the United States because it's all about profit. It's all about the CEO getting all the money that they possibly can. It's, again, raking the American people. I'm glad this deal was done. Kudos to President Trump for getting this deal done. However, I do have a huge problem with him creating a website for profit to, him making money off of his deals. That's not the way it's supposed to work. Again, he refuses to do anything unless there's something in it for him and or his family. It's transparent. It's out there. So, what are you going to do? I find that disgusting. Why can't the guy just do something for the American people and not have to stick his fingers in it and say, what's in it for me? He's always got this what's in it for me deal. And I find that extremely sad that's how we've got to do stuff. But, geez, I don't know. Moving on to other news, as you're well aware of, unless you're hiding under a rock, the Epstein Files were released in small batches by the Justice Department, although it was supposed to be released in its entirety. And now they say that's not going to really happen probably until the end of the year. And what has been released by the Justice Department has been heavily redacted. In other words, there are some full pages that are all blacked out. You can't read anything, and that's not what it was supposed to be. The judge said that all of the records should be released in its entirety, and the only thing that's supposed to be redacted are the victim's name and nobody else. However, the Justice Department, of course, under probably orders from Donald Trump so he can protect his buddies, he wants everything redacted. So we're going to have to see if there will be any changes in that, but probably not. So the Justice Department did release thousands of records related to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's justice yesterday, after Congress passed bipartisan legislation last month that forced the release. The documents include photos and court records. So Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche told Congress that more documents, of course, would be released in the upcoming weeks. The law required that the Justice Department to make public all unclassified records relating to Epstein, with limited exceptions, including those to protect the identity of the victims within 30 days. Of course, as we have been seeing on most of these documents, everything is heavily redacted, and they are just, blacking out everything. You can't tell me that on every page everybody's a victim, and so let's censor that. No. You know what's going on here. Even though Trump did sign the law into play on November 19th, exactly 30 days ago, DOJ said that we're going to get them out there, but it's going to take time to go through all of these files. What are we supposed to do? We're working as fast as we possibly can. Now, his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, is, of course, serving a 20-year prison sentence on sex trafficking charges, and her Kush cell in Colorado where, of course, she's getting all the finest meals that you possibly can. She's got a dog now, and she of course, is just getting whatever the heck she wants while she's sitting in prison because she agreed to talk a little bit about some things, and what that was, we have no idea. And, of course, she gets to, enjoy life to its fullest while sitting in her very low security cell now in Colorado. Now, let's move on to Donald Trump's prime time speech. That thing was so full of holes, and he was so angry because the Epstein Files has been more or less in the news lately, and it's not focusing on him and all the great things that he's done. So he is literally screaming at people, and he had this speech, of course, that I'm going to dissect for you because 99.9% of what he said is just unfortunately not true. What I found kind of funny, because this guy is having trouble now following a teleprompter, the very first words out of his mouth was, good evening, American. He forgot to say Americans. You don't believe me? Watch this brief clip.
Good evening, America.
Did you catch that? You didn't? Let me play it one more time.
Good evening, America.
So I guess he just had one person watching his primetime speech. I know a lot of people didn't watch it, except for the press media who are paid to watch it. But good evening, American. I haven't seen anybody else pick up on that. I think I'm the only one that has picked up on that. You've seen it right here on the Right is Left podcast. So, all right. So before I move on, let me play the rest of the highlights. I'm not going to play the whole damn speech, of course, but let me just play the rest of the highlights here for you, and then I'm going to talk about what he said.
When I took office, inflation was the worst in 48 years, and some would say in the history of our country. Our border was open, and because of this, our country was being invaded by an army of 25 million people, many who came from prisons and jails, mental institutions, and insane asylums. They were drug dealers, gang members, and even 11,888 murderers, more than 50% of whom killed more than one person. I was elected in a landslide, winning the popular vote and all 7 swing states and everything else, with a mandate to take on a sick and corrupt system that really just took the wealth from people and crushed the dreams of the American people. For the last 4 years, the United States was ruled by politicians who fought only for insiders, illegal aliens, career criminals, corporate lobbyists, prisoners, terrorists, and above all, foreign nations, which took advantage of us at levels never seen before. Here are just some of the efforts that we have underway. You will see in your wallets and bank accounts in the new year. After years of record-setting falling incomes, our policies are boosting take-home pay at a historic pace. Under Biden, real wages plummeted by $3,000. Under Trump, the typical factory worker has seen a wage increase of $1,300. For construction workers, it's $1,800. For miners, we're bringing back clean, beautiful coal. It's $3,300. And for the first time in years, wages are rising much faster than inflation. Very importantly, there are more people working today than at any time in American history, and 100% of all jobs created since I took office have been in the private sector. Think of that. 100% of all jobs have been in the private sector rather than government, which is the only way to make a country powerful and great. Standing up to the special interest to dramatically reduce the price of prescription drugs, I negotiated directly with the drug companies and foreign nations, which were taking advantage of our country for many decades, to slash prices on drugs and pharmaceuticals by as much as 400, 500, and even 600%. And they are demanding those increases, and it's their fault. It is not the Republicans' fault. It's the Democrats' fault. It's the Unaffordable Care Act, and everybody knew it. Then the rental market came from foreign migrants. At the same time, illegal aliens stole American jobs and flooded emergency rooms, getting free health care and education paid for by you, the American taxpayer. Look at Minnesota, where Somalians have taken over the economics of the state and have stolen billions and billions of dollars from Minnesota.
So President Donald Trump made a series of false claims during his primetime address from the White House on this past Wednesday night, most of which have been debunked before. So here's a little bit of fact-checking on some of his assertions. Inflation and the economy under Donald Trump. Now, near the end of the speech, of course, he also falsely claimed that inflation is stopped. Inflation has gone down on this last data report, which I just talked about, which is not complete. It is only reporting what has been available in the form of data since the government reopened. So typically these reports cover 6 months, and this is just covering a little bit. So thus, the figures of 2.7% is a little skewed, but still it's good news. Don't get me wrong, it is good news. I'll give credit where credit is due. But it hasn't stopped. The most recent available year-over-year inflation rate at the time he spoke on Wednesday is 3.0% or 3%, which was in September. The new report came out, it dropped, to 2.7 with limited data available. Now, that is the same rate when Trump returned to office in January. In fact, if you go to multiple decimal places, the September rate was a tiny bit higher, and September was the 5th consecutive month the year-over-year rate has increased. The year-over-year November rate released the morning after Trump's speech was 2.7, as I just told you, but that means prices are rising less quickly than they were in September. Not that inflation has ceased. The October number wasn't calculated because the government shut down, which I just said. I want you to fully understand that, which was also impacted by the government's data collection. So inflation under Biden, he keeps blaming the damn Democrats all the time. Trump, and when he can't do anything else, it's always going to be Joe Biden's fault. Everything in the world is Joe Biden's fault. Not my fault. It's the previous administration. He's been in office almost a year now, but it's still Joe Biden's fault. Now, Trump repeated his false claim that when I took office, inflation was the worst in 48 years, and some would say in the history of our country. The year-over-year inflation rate in the last full month of the Biden administration from December 2024 was 2.9%. It was 3.0% in January 2025, the month of Trump's second inauguration. That's the same as the most recent available rate at the time Trump spoke on this past Wednesday, 3% in September 2025. Again, the November rate released Thursday morning was 2.7. We don't know who Trump was referring to when he said some would say, but neither the December 2024 number nor the January 2025 number was anywhere close to the worst inflation in decades of all time. So you've got to remember that. It is true that the year-over-year U.S. inflation rates hit about a 40-year high, not a 48-year high during the Biden administration in June 2022, 9.1%. But even that was not close to the all-time record of 23.7% set in 1920. And it occurred more than 2 years before Trump returned. Inflation, in fact, has plummeted before Trump's inauguration. The cumulative damage or cumulative increase in prices from the beginning of the Biden administration to the end was also the worst in U.S. history. Now, federal figures show somewhat that cumulative inflation under Biden was less than half of that during President Jimmy Carter's term. So let's talk a little bit about grocery prices. Trump went on and on about grocery prices, how all grocery prices are now falling to record lows. And he also went on to say, he has this thing about eggs, has plummeted since March, Trump added, and everything else is falling rapidly. That is not true, even if he was talking specifically about grocery prices, which are continually rising. Now, the Consumer Price Index data shows that a number of grocery items have increased in price since he returned to office, then have decreased. The most recent available CPI figures at the time he spoke on Wednesday for September showed that the average grocery prices were up about 2.7% from September 2024 and about 1.4% from January 2025, the month Trump returned to office, and about 0.3% from August to September. The November data released Thursday morning showed that the average grocery prices were up about 1.9% from November 2024 and about 1.2% from January 2025. Trump's specific claim about egg prices was this: the price of eggs is down 82% since March. That needs context. The White House told CNN on Thursday morning the president, of course, was referring to wholesale egg prices, not the consumer prices that the average Americans actually pay. Oh, gee, okay. So consumer price index figures released Thursday morning show consumer egg prices were down 54% between March and November. A big drop, but much smaller than the 82% Trump cited at the time he spoke on Wednesday night. Now, as you're all aware of, the egg prices went up because of disease with the chicken. So it's a supply and demand issue. So true eggs prices have come down. But again, he said he was referring to the wholesale prices. And of course, how people, when it gets to the consumer, how the people want to mark that up, that's going to be up to them. And this is a case with most manufacturers. If he wants to really do something, he needs to get on the distributors, because now they're making huge profits. Egg prices got way up there. The wholesale prices dropped down, but the wholesalers are not passing on those savings to the consumers. Again, so if you got people who are going to rip people off and keep the prices inflated, because even though wholesale prices have dropped, then you need to do something about that, Mr. President. And of course, he is Mr. Businessman. He loves profits. The more you can rake the people, the better it is, because it's money in their pockets. It's all about profits. So, let's take a look at that. Let's talk about prescription drug prices. Now, again, Trump just announced that he's made a deal with drug manufacturers that we're now going to get great lower prices because we're now in a favored nation status. And the companies are going to be, discounting prices dramatically. And, of course, part of that deal was that they start selling their drug products on his new Trump website, RX, so he can claim that he's got, prices reduced to the American people, but of course he wants to put money in his pocket for doing that. So you're going to sell your stuff on my website that I'm going to create in January, okay? And I know, for one, I'm not going to shop on that thing. I don't trust him as far as I can throw a stick. But prescription drug prices, he repeated his false claim that an executive order he issued on prescription drug prices will cut those prices by as much as 400, 500, even 600%. These figures, ladies and gentlemen, are mathematically impossible. In other words, it'd be a minus $600 to somebody, or maybe it's to his website. I don't know. So if the president magically got the companies to reduce the prices of all their drugs to $0, that would be a 100% cut. Not 600% cut. Where the hell he's getting those figures, I have no idea. And talk about gas prices. Trump said gasoline is now under $2.50 a gallon in much of the country, and in some states it has just hit $1.99 a gallon. He repeated that again. These claims need context. As of Wednesday, there were only 4 states whose average price for a gallon of regular gas was below $2.50, according to a data published by AAA. And those states are Oklahoma, Arkansas, Iowa, and Colorado. I will also mention that I've seen some low gas prices in Tennessee as well in my travels. Oklahoma, typically because it's a huge oil-producing state, has possibly the lowest prices in the U.S. 9 more states had averages below $2.50 and $2.60 per gallon. The AAA national average is $2.95. Oklahoma's $2.33 per gallon is their average price, not $1.99. And while some individual stations around the country were offering gas prices for a little bit at $1.99 per gallon or less, the number was tiny. Now, Patrick Dehan, head of petroleum analysis for the firm Gas Buddy, estimated Wednesday that it was between 75 and 100 stations of the roughly 150,000 Gas Buddy stations that they do track around the country had that price. And whether they're still there or not, that's to be debated. Dehan also said on Thursday that as of the early hours Thursday morning, about 125 stations out of the roughly 150,000 stations were at or below $1.99 a gallon. So again, 125 stations out of 150,000 stations. So Trump, that's great. We're all going to drive to those gas stations, and get our tanks full. That's what we're going to do, by golly. So investment in the U.S. this year, Trump repeated his false claim that there has been $18 trillion in investment in the United States during his second presidency, saying Wednesday, I've secured a record-breaking $18 trillion of investment into the United States. Again, that is an all-out lie. If he has, prove it. Bring up the paper. At the time he spoke on Wednesday, the White House's own website said the figure was $9.6 trillion, and even that is a major exaggeration. A detailed CNN interview and a review in October found the White House was counting trillions of dollars in vague investment pledges. Key word, pledges. That were about bilateral trade or economic exchange rather than investment in the United States, or vague statements that didn't even rise to the level of those pledges. Not actual solid dollar investment pledges. You can read more on CNN's website if you so desire. And immigration and foreign policy, Trump talked a little bit about that. He continued to berate Minnesota for their immigrants, and he kept saying that he's restored American strength, settled 8 wars in 10 months, while Trump has played a role in resolving some conflicts, at least temporarily. The 8 figure is a clear, again, exaggeration. Trump has previously explained that his list of supposed war settlements included war between Egypt and Ethiopia, but that wasn't actually a war. It was a long-running diplomatic dispute about a major Ethiopian dam project on a tributary of the Nile River. Trump's list also includes another supposed war that didn't actually occur during his presidency between Siberia and Kosovo, I should say, and he has sometimes claimed to have prevented the eruption of a new war between those two entities, proving few details about what he meant. But that is different than settling an actual war. Remember, disputes is not war, where you've got bombs, missiles, rockets going back and forth. They're disputes. And his list includes a supposed success in ending a war involving the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. And that war has continued despite a peace agreement brokered by the Trump administration this past year, which was never signed by the leading rebel coalition doing the fighting. Trump's list also includes an armed conflict between Thailand and Cambodia, where fighting erupted again this month and continued into this week despite a peace agreement brokered by the Trump administration earlier in the year. One can debate the importance of Trump's role in having ended other conflicts on his list, or fairly question whether some have truly ended. For example, killing continued in Gaza in November after the October ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. Regardless, Trump's 8 figure is obviously too big. Migration and also on Biden, Trump repeated his false claim that 25 million migrants entered the country under Biden. The 25 million figure is false. Even Trump's previous 21 million figure was a wild exaggeration, though, through December of 2024. Again, he's got all these figures that it just comes out of his mouth. Show the American people on paper where you're getting that. Just don't talk about it and think we're all stupid idiots. If you're going to say these things, prove it. Give us the paper. Stuff comes out of your mouth, and I know your MAGA support likes to, yeah, okay, man, that's great. Yep, that's what you're saying. Then that's the gospel. That's the truth. There are some of us who have critical thinking skills, and we would like to see the numbers on paper. Where's your data coming from? And again, under the Biden administration, the federal government had recorded under 11 million nationwide encounters, keyword encounters, with migrants during the administration, including millions who were rapidly expelled from the country, even adding to the so-called gotaways who evaded detection, estimated by the House Republicans as being roughly 2.2 million. There's no way the total was even close to that, what Trump has said. Trump also reported in his unsubstantiated claim that during the Biden administration, foreign countries emptied their prisons and mental institutions to somehow send the people, all of them, to the United States as migrants, claiming that many members of the supposed army of 25 million people were from prisons and jails, mental institutions, rapists, and insane asylums. Trump has never provided corroboration for such claims about foreign countries in general or the specific places he has named in the past, Venezuela and the Congo. Experts on Venezuela, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the neighboring Republic of Congo has said that during the Biden administration that they had seen no basis for Trump's stories. The governments on both sides of the Congo countries told CNN again that the stories were false and that the expert on the global prison population was absolutely, there's no evidence as such of any country emptying its prisons, insane asylums, or, rapists and everything else into the United States. His other topics, and I'm going to wrap this up. Let's talk about Social Security. He repeated his false claim that the big domestic policy bill he signed earlier this year includes no tax on Social Security. The legislation did create an additional temporary $6,000 per year tax deduction for individuals aged 65 and older, with a smaller deduction for individuals earning $75,000 per year or more. But the White House itself has implicitly not acknowledged that millions of Social Security recipients aged 65 and older will continue to pay taxes on their benefits, and that the new deduction, which expires in 2028, just so this thing's just going to last us about 2 years, doesn't even apply to Social Security recipients who are younger than 65. Biden, crime in the law enforcement. Again, Trump falsely claimed that under Biden there was crime at record levels with law enforcement, and words such as that just absolutely are forbidden. Either of these two claims is not, it's not true under the Biden administration. There was no ban on the phrase law enforcement under Biden. The Biden administration itself used the phrase repeatedly, and crime wasn't even close to its all-time high under Biden. Crime in the United States was far higher in the early 1990s and at various points in the 1970s and 80s than it was between the 2020s under either Biden or Donald Trump. Murder spiked nationally amid the turmoil of the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic under both Trump in 2020 and Biden in 2021. But the FBI data showed that both violent crime and property crime declined nationally under Biden in 2023 and 2024. Trump said, well, that's bullshit. That's not true. The FBI data is not right. And while it does have flaws and limitations and some data, that's the facts, okay? And the Affordable Care Act, as you're well aware of, Trump says that, I'm going to have a new plan and I'm going to save you all thousands of dollars. His new plan, of course, I think his part is that Trump RX website that he wants to put up and use because of the deal with the drug people, he's going to put that on his website where he can grease his palms again, and that's going to be part of his new deal. I can bet you safely on that that's going to be part of his claim, because unfortunately the Affordable Care Act, we're running out of time, folks. Nothing's going to happen. Johnson's sending the House of Representatives home for the holidays, and nothing's going to act on it. So he calls it the Unaffordable Care Act, which was created to make insurance companies rich. That's what he says. And that's another false claim about Democrats saying it was bad health care at much too high of a cost, and you can see now in the steep increase in premiums being demanded by the Democrats. The Democrats are demanding the steep premiums, huh? Okay, if you say so. And they are demanding those increases, and it's their fault. Everything is the Democrats' fault. Republicans, we don't have any faults. We're just perfect all the way around. And so Democrats are not demanding steep premium increases. Rather, Democrats in Congress are trying to prevent Americans from facing steep increases in their premium payments because of Trump's new big, beautiful bill, by pushing for an extension of the enhanced pandemic-era Obamacare premium subsidies that is scheduled to expire. There are 6 Republicans who agree with the Democrats that Obamacare should be extended, or the Affordable Care Act, for at least another 2 years. So there are some Republicans with common sense that side with the Democrats on this, just so you know. And a White House spokesperson claimed Thursday on condition of autonomy that Trump's point was that the Democrats just want to increase the amount of government money going towards insurance companies, which allows them to increase their premiums. And that's what he says. But again, it's not true. The last thing that I want to point out here, in Trump's primetime speech, he talked about these one-time military payments. He took full credit for it, and that checks are already in the process of being given to the military. And first and foremost, let me tell you, God bless our military. I'm glad they're getting some money. But what I don't agree with is the way Trump phrased it, that it was all his own personal dealing, that he got that money himself to the military recipients, and it was all his doing. Again, unfortunately, that's a lie. What actually happened is a one-time military payment, which President Trump called a warrior dividend, because he likes to, get there and boast about how great he is, was not a new idea from his administration, but rather a rebranding of existing funds that were already approved by Congress. The funding was initially intended for military housing allowance, which Congress had approved earlier in the year. The $1,776 per service member payment was drawn from approximately $2.9 billion in military housing funds that were part of a larger legislative package passed in 2025 in July, referred to as some as the One Big Beautiful Bill. Now, these funds were set aside to supplement the basic allowance for housing program, as concerns had been raised that military families are having a hard time coming up with a way for paying their rent that don't live on base. Existing stipends were not keeping pace with rising housing costs for those military families. And of course, congressional appropriation was the one that got this funded. The funds were approved by Congress, not by Donald Trump, and they were generated from new or excess tariff revenues, as President Trump said initially. So the money didn't come from excessive tariffs or new tariffs. It was approved by Congress, although Trump likes to say that. Now, Trump is the guy that said, I'm going to rebrand this and call it, from the Department of War. He had Pete Hegseth make sure that money was there for him. And he called it a warrior dividend. So he just put a name on it. It's a warrior dividend. And Pete Hegseth was responsible for that. No, Congress was responsible for it. Symbolic amount, the specific amount of $1,776 was chosen by the Trump administration to honor the year of the nation's founding rather than being tied to the original housing cost calculations. Now, this, of course, follows a pattern where President Trump has previously claimed sole credit for routine annual military pay raises, which are typically determined by a federal formula, and I'm not going to go into all of that. But as you can see, so this $1,776 was framed and picked so it looked good for Donald Trump to say, I'm giving this to you, the military people, a one-time lump sum check for you. And of course, it's for housing allowance, and it was passed, clear last year. Trump had nothing to do with it. It was written into the bill for housing allowance. But again, Trump likes to get on national television and look at me, so there you go. Donald Trump, and let's just get into him here real quick. This guy, he loves the stage, he loves the spotlight, he loves everything that's typically, when it's showing him that he's the guy. So if he's on stage, the camera's looking at him, and he's getting to the point now where he can't even read a teleprompter. He's a happy camper. All right. The Senate also gave a passage of a military policy bill that would authorize $901 billion in defense programs while pressuring Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to provide lawmakers with video of strikes on alleged drug boats on international waters near Venezuela. Again, they want to, they're getting ready to, step up the rhetoric with Venezuela, and now we're going into the Middle East, it looks like, on some things. So $901 billion, Pete Hicks says we need more money so the Department of War can go out there and, put boots on the ground and start killing more people. So let's get this going here. But he's holding off and showing that video of those boat strikes. He's shown some of the stuff, and some of the Republicans, of course, who are very loyal to Donald Trump, said, oh, yeah, it looks like, they had something in their hands there. It's a good thing they killed him. Well, of course, people with common sense are looking at that and say, I don't think so. It looks like they're just clinging on the boats so they could get rescued. And international, war documents and the things about war is that even back in World War II, if you see survivors, you're supposed to pick them up. You just don't sit there with a gun and mow them all down. That's what you're supposed to do, humanitarian, So the annual National Defense Authorization Act, which raises troop pay by 3.8%, gained bipartisan backing as it moved through Congress, and the White House has indicated that it's in line with President Trump's national security priorities. So we're going to give our soldiers and our fighting men and women a little bit more money. However, the legislation, which ran over 3,000 pages, revealed some points of friction between Congress and the Pentagon as the Trump administration reorients its focus away from security in Europe and towards Central and South America. So, again, we are getting ready to do some battling here, it looks like. boots on the ground in Venezuela? Perhaps. We don't know yet. But you can see what's going on here with they want more money so we can do more fighting. And to me, that's just a little bit scary. Some changing away from just a little bit here. Let's talk about one other person here. And that's going to be Jack Smith. Y'all remember him, don't you? Well, he was called into a special session under closed doors. He wanted this hearing public with cameras on. The Republicans refused, so they could sit there and talk about some other things behind closed doors. But former special counsel Jack Smith told a congressional committee this past Wednesday that his team found proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's what this is all about, that President Donald Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn the results of the 2020 election, according to portions of his opening statement. This was attained by NBC News. Trump also repeatedly tried to obstruct justice to keep secret his retention of classified documents, which were found in Mar-a-Lago. All right. So Smith told members of the White House Judiciary, not White House, I apologize, the House Judiciary Committee during a closed-door hearing all this information. And Smith said his team turned up powerful evidence that showed Trump willfully retained highly classified documents after he left office in January of 2021, storing them at his social club in Mar-a-Lago, including a bathroom and a ballroom where events were held. The House Oversight Committee Chairman Jim Jordan from Ohio subpoenaed Smith to testify as part of the Republican efforts to investigate the special counsel's office. They wanted to find out if he was lying, if this was all crap and that it wasn't there, and he was just making this stuff up because he had a revenge agenda against Donald Trump. Smith is a very level-headed guy, and I can tell you right now, he was just doing his job. And the photographs that we've all seen proved that. Now, his investigations did lead to 2 indictments against Trump in the classified documents case and the 2020 election interference case. Trump-appointed U.S. District Judge, of course, Eileen Cannon, dismissed those classified documents case in July 2024 because she's all buddy-buddy with Donald Trump. And then a separate judge agreed to drop the 2020 case in November 2024 after Trump won re-election because you cannot prosecute a sitting president. Now, that's why Trump was so desperate to get into office again. Now, he has reportedly called for Smith to be prosecuted for what? Facing a renewed wave of Republican attacks on his investigations into Trump, Smith was expected to attempt to use the hearing to correct what his team had described as mischaracterizations about the special counsel investigation. Smith had wanted to testify in a public setting, as I just told you, but the Republicans said, no, you're not going to do that. So again, his attorney said he's shown tremendous courage and he's doing well and he's pushing back at any criticism. And Jack Smith is the hearing, in his opinion, went really well. Over 160 individuals later pled guilty to assaulting police officers during the insurrection of that day. Smith said. And he said, exploiting that violence, President Trump and his associates tried to call members of Congress in furtherance of their criminal scheme, urging them to further delay certification of the 2020 election, as we are all aware of. And of course, you heard people say, well, let's hang Mike Pence because he refused to, Pence was courageous and did the right thing. And Trump, of course, tried to overturn the election. He still says to this day that the 2020 election was a fraud and it was, fake, and that I should have won that one too. And again, that's Donald Trump. And I don't know what it's the guy. The guy is I've not, my years on this earth and my years involved in politics and being a former Republican for 52 years, I've never ever seen a guy like this in my entire life. It's just strange beyond belief. In other news, of course, we were talking earlier about Venezuela and the tankers that are now being careened off by the United States, and blockades are being put up so these tankers can't get through. Well, as you're well aware of, if you've been watching the gas pumps, oil prices rose 1% following that blockade announcement on those Venezuela tankers. Trump labels Venezuelan regime a foreign terrorist organization. Again, this is how he's getting around not having to get approval from Congress to do wartime acts. He uses the word terrorist, and bam, he has automatic approval to do whatever the heck he wants. So now The drug boats are all run by terrorists, and those boats and the oil tankers are all run by terrorists. So therefore, I have full authority to use the military to do whatever I want against these people. The whole thing with Venezuela, of course, is about oil. Trump wants it. He wants the oil. And the drug thing, I think, is a minor thing in all this. The whole bottom line, and he's actually said it, is he says the oil belongs to the United States. How that's possible, I don't know, but that's what he says. And, of course, Venezuela rejects Trump's grotesque threat. Now, we all know that he also wants to get rid of Maduro. And, again, we can see why he wants to do that. And the guy, of course, has been prosecuted, so I'm not going to argue with that. Maduro needs to go. How Trump is going to do this is probably boots on the ground, and they're going to find a way either through the CIA or military action to get this guy out of there. He claims, like as I said, it's a threat against his vast oil reserve. And it is true that some of the oil is going to countries we don't like, such as Russia and China. So I guess I have mixed feelings about the blockade. In some ways, it's a good thing. In some ways, it's not such a good thing, because you got to figure out, they're in international waters, and we have to be careful what we do in international waters. That's the whole thing. Now, he's going to continue these blockades against those tankers. He's going to turn either the Coast Guard or the Navy to do that. The administration has moved thousands of troops, as you're already well aware of, and nearly a dozen warships off the coast of Venezuela, including an aircraft carrier. And he says it's the theft of our assets and many other reasons, including terrorism and drug smuggling and human trafficking. And the Venezuela regime has been designated a foreign terrorist organization. That, again, he said that so he can use these military actions. Now, again, the American people, which I am one of, simply are asking one thing: show us the proof. That's all we want to see. Show us the proof. Nobody, including Pete Hegseth or in these congressional investigations, have shown us proof. They've shown us video of bombing boats and these oil tankers. It is true that some of them are going to countries we're not too happy with. But again, when you're in international waters, you got to be careful how you do things. And so he wants a total, complete blockade without the approval of Congress, and he's going into and out of Venezuela. And again, because of these threats, and because Venezuela is a major oil-producing country, our gas prices are going up. Now, they did stabilize a little bit, but right here in Florida, where I live, when this thing was announced, gas got down to was it $2.68? I think it did, or something like that. Yeah, down to $2.68. When this blockade happened, it shot back up to $3.05 in 24 hours. That shows you how volatile, the crude oil prices are. So it did level off. Now, if this continues, you can watch your gas pump prices go back up again. Now, they went up 1% on the Asian trade. Brent crude futures were up 70 cents, or 1.2% at $59.62 a barrel, while the U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude, when this occurred, 73 cents. Prices went up, or 1.3%, to $56 a barrel. Crude futures climbed over 1% to $55.96 a barrel in Asian trading after Trump's announcement. And then they all settled, as I said, at $55.27. So gas prices went back down. Right now here in Florida, where I'm at, gas is at currently at $2.83 right now. It went over $3 a gallon there briefly. So oil market participants said prices were rising in anticipation of a potential reduction in Venezuela exports, although they were still waiting to see how Trump's blockade would be enforced and whether it would extend to including non-sanctioned vessels. All right. So the American presidents have broad discretion to deploy U.S. forces abroad, as I just said, using the word terrorist, but Trump's asserted blockade marks a new test of presidential authority. So he's testing how much he can actually do if he has to go crying again back to the Supreme Court to have them rule on what he can and cannot do with blockades of oil vessels. So this is all going to be extremely interesting to watch how they do this, because these blockades can get kind of testy. The last time we seen any huge blockades was, if you remember, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was necessary when Russia was trying to put missiles on country, the Cuba, which is very close to U.S. shores, and we did do a blockade there. And of course, it got very close to a nuclear war outbreak, but the Russia blinked and they turned around and went back, and it never occurred. So now we're blockading oil tankers. And then we're doing something else in the Middle East again. They're talking about invading other countries. So we got to be careful here. Trump likes conflict. It makes him look big. He does like it. Pete Hegseth likes conflict. That's why they changed the Department of War. We are now going to be the big bullies, and everybody's going to bow down to us. And this is what they're trying to do here. So we're get ready for whatever happens here. All right. Moving on to other news here, of course, is Susie Wiles. She's awfully very soft-spoken and quiet, and has been behind the scenes, but now she's in the limelight since of her interview that she has given to Vanity Fair. So Trump's chief of staff here, and she's the first female chief of staff, and she's, like I said, been typically quiet lately, but she's said some things which she said the Vanity Fair took out of context, but they have the complete record and audio recording. So they said, he wants to play it, we will. But anyway, she says she wants to keep on blowing, Trump wants to keep on blowing boats up until Maduro cries uncle, Maduro, I should say, and the Pentagon and Coast Guard referred questions to the White House about what he actually said that. So the House won't vote this week on the extension to the Affordable Care Act that she has talked about, which is going to lapse, and so that's not going to happen. But Susie, she's been talking quite a bit here about some things about Donald Trump, and you can probably read it all for yourself if you'd like to about what she actually said. But she was a little unusually candid and at times unflattering when she was talking about President Donald Trump and his second-term agenda and some of his closest allies in a series of wide-ranging interviews with Vanity Fair this past Tuesday. And, of course, they said they did about 10 interviews with her, and she's quite frank about stuff. One thing that kind of raised some eyebrows, she said that working with Donald Trump is kind of like working with somebody who has an alcoholic personality, despite being known as a teetotaler. She acknowledged the president's appetite for revenge, which we have seen, conceding many of his second-term actions were driven by a desire for retribution. And she also suggested that Trump was pursuing a regime change in Venezuela through his boat bombing campaign, contradicting official justifications for the strikes. And, of course, it's all about the oil. And she described several controversial areas where the president ignored her advice, including the deportations and pardons. The comments made in conversations with author Chris Whipple are striking both in candor and in topic. Of course, she said her words were taken out of context. It was a hit piece. Donald Trump totally supports Susie Wiles. She's doing a great job, he said, and that that's just another typical left-wing media piece trying to make things that are not true. And she said Susie Wiles is my gatekeeper, and she is doing great. So we'll have to continue to watch this to see if something's going to happen to her, but I think the main thing that came out of this interview, which we all knew, is that Donald Trump, this whole term is about retribution. People, his enemies. He wants to get each and every one of them. He wants them jailed because of what they done to him. He is a 34-count convicted felon. And whoever, all those people brought those charges against him, since I am now the president, the most powerful man in the world, and the Supreme Court's given me free reign to do whatever I want, I'm going to get each and every one of them, and they're going to go to jail. And, people like James Comey, the list goes on and on. Jack Smith, it makes me sad that he wants to treat people like this. Everybody else can do their job, but he hates anything negative against them. And to me, I don't know That's like a child personality, in my opinion. You are open to criticism. Not everybody is a Republican in these United States. He thinks everybody is a Republican, that every single soul, living, breathing soul, needs to bow down to him and kiss his ring. And you have no right to criticize anything or whatever I say or do. I am the president. You bow down to me. I don't care who you are. And again, this is this authoritarian personality he has, and this king personality he has, like in the days of the, Robin Hood and the dragons. It's sad, I don't know what makes a man have a personality like this, but Susie Wiles kind of said that what basically how it actually is. So we'll go from there. One other thing that was brought up in this is, take a look at this little group shot. This has gotten a lot of criticism too. It shows the gang sitting there, on the table, like posed, like look at us, boy. We're the people here. And some people kind of question that picture too a little bit. People sitting on the desk, like all casual, like, what do you want to do about that? We're so cool. Some other news that's going on, talk about retribution, is, I don't know if you've been following this, is the BBC. Trump is suing them for $10 billion. That's with the B, ladies and gentlemen, $10 billion. He filed a defamation lawsuit Monday against the BBC in his continued strategy to take the press to court. If you don't say anything positive about me, I'm going to sue you and take you to court, just like he tried to do with CBS and ABC. And, of course, they all bowed down and came up with the deal behind the scenes to have the charges dropped. BBC, and it's the same thing, tried to do the same thing. They fired a couple CEOs, but, Trump does not give up. You made me mad. I'm going to make sure that you pay. So, and it all hinges what happened here. It was an edit presented in a documentary, The President's Words, on one of the fateful day going back to last year. And, of course, it's the thing about this is he's suing him out of a Florida court. In the episode, this is the BBC, keep in mind, never even aired in Florida. But what it is they said there were some sloppy edits. That the BBC did a documentary on the president, and he made to his supporters on January 6, 2021, before they laid siege on the U.S. Capitol. The episode seamlessly links Trump's call for people to walk up to the Capitol with his exclamation of about 55 minutes later saying, and we fight like hell. And he did say that, but it's the way the BBC edited it. And if you don't fight like hell, you don't have a country anymore. Trump's attorneys argued that the presentation gives viewers the impression that the president incited the violence that followed. They said his remarks had been doctored, not edited, and that noted the omission of a statement that protesters would be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make their voices heard. As NPR and other news organizations have documented, many defendants in the January 6th attack on Congress said they believe they have been explicitly urged by Trump to block the certification of President-elect Joe Biden's victory. Trump's lawsuit calls the documentary false, defamatory, deceptive, disparaging, inflammatory, and malicious depiction of the president. The lawsuit alleges that the depiction was fabricated and aired in a brazen attempt to interfere and influence the election to President Trump's determinant. Now, while the BBC has not filed a formal response to the lawsuit, the Public Broadcasting Service did iterate that it will defend itself in court. A November 13th letter to Trump's legal team on behalf of the BBC from Charles Tobin, a leading U.S. First Amendment attorney, argued that the broadcaster has demonstrated contrition by apologizing, withdrawing the broadcast, and accepting the executive's resignation that resigned over this. He also noted that on behalf of the BBC, that Trump had already been indicted by a grand jury on 4 criminal counts stemming from his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, including his conduct on January 6, 2021 on the Capitol grounds. So the appeal of BritBox for all the current conversations about the documentary, it didn't get much attention at that time. The BBC aired the documentary twice on the eve of 2024 elections, but never broadcast it directly in Florida, where this lawsuit was filed. That matters because a lawsuit being filed in Florida where Trump alleges that the program was intended to discourage voters from voting for him never aired. The whole premise of this whole thing is Donald Trump likes to control the media. He wants to have a state-controlled media in the United States. And even though BBC is not a United States entity, as far as we do see their programming here, it originates from over in England. He still doesn't even like that too. Anything negative about him, he don't want to air it. Now, I am going to give Donald Trump credit here because I watched the piece, and yes, it was edited to sound like he said those things by running a couple pieces together. News stations will do this all the time. Left wing, right wing. Fox News has done this. Edited things to where it appears people said something without not having the whole thing. It's called taking things out of context. Okay? It happens a lot so people can get the slant that they want. But what's going to happen here with the BBC thing, we're going to have to further watch along and see what happens. I always use that word, we'll just have to see what happens. And it's true in this thing too. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens. As I wrap up this episode of The Right Has Left, I want to bring to your attention how many people are leaving their congressional seats because they've all had a gutful and they've had it. Now, some have won elections to governorships and other things, but there's a lot of people who are just hanging up their shingle and saying, enough is enough. I can't take this anymore. I'm retiring. And here is a list, as I wrap this up, of people who are going to be leaving us. Dan Newhouse. He's going to retire in 2025. Jasmine Crockett, a Democrat. She's going to be running for the Senate, so she's resigning her seat. Mark Vassie, he's a Democrat. He's retiring on the November 29th of 2025. Troy Nels is a Republican House from Texas. He's retiring November 21st, 2025. Marjorie Taylor Greene, in a very public statement because of what Trump said to her, she's retiring. We don't know what she's going to be doing, but she's getting out. Eric Swallow, who is a Democrat, he is retiring, but he's also going to be running for governor. Nadezhda Balquez, she's a Democrat from New York. She's retiring on November 20th, 2025. That'll be an interesting race to see what the Republicans are going to do about that. Sherrill, who's a Democrat, won an election for governor, so he's basically moving, or she is basically moving to the governorship. Jody Arrington, a Republican, is retiring. Bonnie Watson Coleman, a Democrat from New Jersey, she's retiring. And then, of course, this includes the retirement of longtime leaders like California Representative Nancy Pelosi and Kentucky Senator Mitch McConnell. He needs to retire. They're leaving him as well, too. Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene, as I mentioned, she's retiring because of what Trump basically said to her, and she didn't like it. And so this is a record amount of people who are retiring. It's from the Trump era. This is a huge amount of people who are getting out. Now, true, some of them are going to be running for the Senate. True, some of them won governorships or are going to run for governor, so that's why they're retiring. But the rest of them, they've publicly said, we just can't do this anymore, including, and I didn't mention this either, the representative from the state of Wyoming. She's getting out too and she's actually said it. She says, I just can't do this anymore. It's just too damn stressful in this administration. She's a loyal Republican, but she says, I'm done, She's 71 years old. She got in it back in 2009. So, she's served a good term. But it just goes to show you, though, the stress that these people are under in this present administration and the pressure that is put upon them because Trump, he'll call each and every one of them. When he wants something to go his way, he gets on the phone and if they say, well, I'm thinking about it, or I'm not sure I want to do this, or I may disagree with you, then he threatens them. Just like he did with Marjorie Taylor Greene. He'll threaten them. And and because of his power, if he threatens you, you don't have the kind of money that he has, and you don't know what's going to happen behind the scenes when something like that happens. So these people just chose to resign instead, and it's sad. But that is your Right Has Left podcast for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know it's a little lengthy, but I had a lot of material to cover, and I have to, give you the other side of sometimes, because you only hear one side, and there's other sides to hear on things like this. So anyway, happy holidays to you, Merry Christmas, and you have a Happy New Year. Until the next time, you try to have a good week. This is Roy Gunn. Take care.